Today we're sitting down with Giannie Couji, who started publishing Ubikwist Magazine that she self-founded back in 2014. Although she might have worked as a traditional magazine publisher in fashion for the past 6 years, she's been working with them, in them, and around them for over 3 decades through her work as a contributing fashion editor of ID Magazine from 1996 to 2010, and as a renowned stylist. The DIY spirit served as the backbone for Ubikwist, which was founded upon the premise of diversity and inclusion in the fashion industry, an outlet for a multicultural perspective on style and culture. Evoking a global perspective, Ubikwist features emerging as well as established talent expressing themselves through the lens of fashion, beauty, music, art, film, and design. Welcome, Giannie. It's great to have you with us from New York.
Thank you for having me.
So first, I'm curious to hear, after working in fashion and in magazines for more than 30 years, what made you decide to start up your own magazine or publishing practice? Was it based on some sort of urgency to make changes in the creative landscape? What was missing from the discourse when you started?
I started Ubikwist Magazine in 2014 because all the magazine I was seeing around, it was like a lack of multicultural diversity, and so that was one of the main reasons. Now I think the landscape is changing slowly a little bit, but at the time in 2014 it wasn't that much diversity in magazine, so that was the main reason.
I also feel like publishing, today, it might not be as powerful in defining opinions as it maybe used to be maybe 15, 20 years back in time because of social media and the internet. But I still think that a lot of publishers today use magazines and and platform understand where the magazine sits in today's very complex media landscape across, publishing conglomerates to micropress, merchandising, branding, on physical and digital mediums. From your experience working, understand fashion media and its mechanisms to have been maintained and what's changed?
The landscape definitely changed. What's changed is social media changed everything. And also, I think the fashion business became a little bit more democratic. I remember when I first started 30 years ago, you knew which hairdresser, which stylist, which makeup artist was working in the business. Now I think the business became so saturated now. So that's what's different now. It became, people are more aware of what's going on in the business. I think before it was more like kind of like a mystery. Now it becomes very democratic. So it's there, it's everywhere. It's on social media, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and there are also a lot of people, practicing in fashion, from photographers, image makers, stylists, models, and it's a whole
Exactly.
it's a whole new way of scouting talent also, due to social media, which I also find really interesting.
Now there is a school with, I mean, when I started in fashion, you didn't have a school to teach you, which I found kind of weird, a school to teach you how to become a fashion stylist. So now that it's existing now, so the landscape is, yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah. The fundamental purpose of publishing is making stuff that is out there and possibly forever. The idea of, fashion publishing includes and goes beyond anything that can be seen as a serialized or published contribution, to the larger conversation, of fashion. What do you think it means to publish in fashion today?
What does it mean? It's a little bit tricky because I mean, it depends. If you if you publish a print magazine or a digital magazine, it's totally different. Obviously, print is, thank God, is still existing. And I mean, I've been hearing for the last 15 years that print is dead and it's not going to go anywhere. And thank God it's not true, because call me old school, but I like print magazine. I think it's a totally different experience when you're flicking through the page of a magazine, from a print magazine, to actually when you're looking at a screen and
What do you think that a print magazine can do that the digital can't?
It's just the feeling of the page. It's something as simple as that. And just you see, I mean, of course, if the magazine is well printed, it's just a different experience. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it is different.
Yeah. Do you read a lot of magazines yourself, and which ones?
Yes, I do. They're not specifically fashion magazine, but I do read a lot of magazine. I mean, one of my favorite magazines is The New Yorker, which have nothing to do with fashion, but I think they have a great selection of articles. I like Vanity Fair. I like Italian Vogue, British Vogue. There is a few magazines online which I really like as well. I like the Intercept magazine. And what else? In terms of fashion magazine, I also like interior design magazine. But mainly, yeah, in a fashion, yeah, I would say also Love magazine is a good one, and System magazine.
In one way, it feels like each issue of Ubiquist has its own, separate thematic that you explore, but at the same time, it feels like they're part of a bigger and holistic, narrative altogether. From the resilience issue to the eclectic issue, Rebirth, Women, and the recent one, which was Vanguard. Can you briefly talk us through the different themes you have explored in each issue, and is there a red thread?
The theme is just it's very organic. It's just like an idea, and also reading the news and doing research online. So it's just, yeah, it's just organic. I think the whole identity of the magazine is very organic. And we try to mix like a mix of fashion and culture, and also we talk a lot about like social issues, activism. So I think that's what makes the magazine different from the others.
Absolutely. And I also find it interesting that you always do multiple covers for each issue, highlighting the sort of multiplicity and the plurality that Ubiquist in many ways stands for. How do you approach that, and what methods have you implemented in Ubiquist in order to sustain the magazine artistically, financially? I mean, it costs a lot of money to produce, various different covers for each issue, but it's great.
It does cost a lot of money, and we don't have a big corporation behind us to give us the money. So at the moment, I mean, since issue 1, the magazine have been like mainly self-funding, and also contribution from people who really likes the magazine. So it could be friends or friends of friends. So because the advertising, we're only starting to get advertising like from the last issue, like paid advertising. So it's been a very, very slow and long process to get advertisers in a magazine.
Yeah, is that because you find advertising to be, a different sort of space to approach, or is it, based on like a creative decision, or is it like a structural decision? Because I also think that a lot of magazines today, they no longer depend on sales money. It's more like, other sort of income, you mentioned donations, contributions, but also, advertising, product placement, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the advertisers, basically, you look at all the magazines now, the advertiser rule basically those magazines, because if you don't have those advertisers in, none of those magazines will survive. I mean, I talk about Condé Nast, Elmer, Clairvaux. It depends a lot on advertising, yeah. So we, since the beginning, we didn't have to because we started basically with zero advertising. Or the only little advertising that we had was like people we believe in and who really liked the magazine and wanted to advertise in the magazine. So yeah, it's a total different approach.
I agree. So I often feel that smaller magazines and running a smaller magazine can become like a one man's show. You know, the publisher or editor does everything oneself, from publishing, producing content, proofreading, design, you know, distribution, and sometimes even like accounting and administrative work. What do your positions as publisher and editor in chief of Ubikwist entail? Do you have a team?
I have a very small team. I mean, all the people, including me, everyone who works for the magazine, we all have different jobs on the side. So I don't have full-time staff. We all have like, other job on the side. So there's three of us basically. There is a design director, there is me, and there is a copy editor. And everyone else is freelance, like photographers, stylists, hair, makeup, and so basically there is three people working for the magazine.
And I'd like to highlight a particular collaboration of yours with former editor-in-chief of Vogue Paris and Yohji Yamamoto's right hand for over 20 years, Irene Silvani. I understand she's part of the Ubiquist team as a sort of consultant at large. How do you work with her, and how important are your contributors for you and the publication's voice?
Oh, when I wanted to launch the magazine, I mean, she was the first person, because obviously I'd never been into publishing, so I have no idea how this was working. So I knew Irene for a very long time. She's a legend in the business. So I decided to give her a call and I explained to her what I wanted to do. So she thought it was a great idea, and she gave me really, really, really great advice. So yeah, just have her, and each time I do an issue, I call her and we talk and we discuss. And but she was very positive when I told her, because most people, when I start doing Ubiquist, most people try to discourage me to do the magazine because they thought it was like a very difficult challenge to take on and I wouldn't succeed. And now I'm working on issue 11. So far, it's hard, but I have no regrets so far.
Yeah. What about other contributors to your magazine, the photographers, the stylists, the writers that you work with? How are you working with them, and how important are they to, Ubiquist as a publication?
Oh, they're very important. I mean, if I didn't have them by my side, the magazine wouldn't exist. So it's all about like a teamwork. Yeah.
In talking about contemporary publishing, I think it's inevitable not to mention the predicted death of printed media. What are your thoughts on this predicted print death? And with the decline of traditional newsstands, how do you imagine print changing?
I mean, I hope that those newsstands still going to be around. Unfortunately, I'm hearing like a lot of them are closing down, especially in Europe, which is really sad. But I think now, I mean, a lot of magazines, they're selling online, I mean, through their website. So I guess that's, I mean, especially with COVID, we don't know how this is going to turn out. So a lot of people is going to order the publication online. I mean, it's starting now. I see I think it was also because of COVID, a lot of, I saw the rise of people buying online like in the last 3 or 4 months.
People also forget that, producing a magazine and a publication or printed matter in general is pretty costly. So I want to think a little bit about, because Ubikwist is sold in many of the leading fashion boutiques, bookshops, and concept stores around the world. And a big part of running a magazine, and I can relate, is controlling what context it's put in, whether it's physically or association wise, or in any other form. And so, what structures do you operate with at Ubiquist in terms of frequency, distribution, circulation? How do you navigate that? How often does it come out? How many copies do you print each time? Where does it, how do you distribute it?
We have, our distributor is based in London. We are a biannual publication, so it's coming out every 6 months. And we publish it between, I would say, between 10 and 12, 14,000 copies. It also depends on the budget that we have, but it's usually, a minimum of 10,000 copies. And the distributor basically does the work, trying to find, the stockists around the world. And I mean, thank God, because, I think it's something I wouldn't be able to do, because it's already so much work, doing the magazine by itself. So I'm glad I have a good distributor, who's able to do that.
That's a lot of copies that you print. And I'm interested in the idea of an independent magazine today, because print advertising, with sales, perhaps the magazine has never been as dependent on external factors and on funding. What do you think characterizes an independent magazine or a publishing company now? Is Ubiquist an independent magazine in your view?
Absolutely, yeah. It's totally independent. It's totally like I say, we don't have any corporation behind us giving us money, so which will help. I mean, I'm not against the idea, because that will help develop the website and maybe get more stockists, worldwide. So yeah, I mean, I'm totally not against having obviously I wouldn't give them, 50% of the company, but maybe 20 or 30%, that, that would be a big help. But that's also the good thing, being independent. It's, you can do whatever you want.
You've stated that Ubiquist gives birth to new visions by using the past to feed the future. Lastly, Giannie, I would like to ask you, what changes would you like to see in the fashion industry at large?
The changes, I would like to see more diversity in a boardroom. I mean, I think it's very good to use, model, black model, or, model of colors, but what's lacking is having people of color in what I call in the boardroom. And people of color would take the big decision for the companies. I mean, I don't know if you follow, but I think it was last year or 2 years ago, we had a few hiccups, as I call it, with Gucci and Prada, with all the blackface stuff. So I think if they had people of color, black people who work, at the top, in the top team in this company, I don't think those things would happen. So they need to be, more diverse, having more top black or people of color, executive people in the team. Absolutely.
Perfect, Giannie. That is great. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.